Hello and welcome yeah, I'm not wording good today.
Hi, welcome to.
Not fighting. I
You
knew
like spit it out like you're like, oh, I had to say it quick or else I can't say it at all.
like it's an answer on like a quiz show. I know this one.
uh,
We're in a lot of trouble if I don't know this one. It's it's
yeah,
our
for sure.
podcast. It's 50% of this thing. We're both pretty tired from training today, actually.
This week, it's not just the day. I think it's just this week. We've been pretty intense training.
It's the throes
I
of
mean, I
summer.
don't know. Just training. Back in the swing of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that you and I were talking about it a little bit earlier, just, training hard and, you know, having your body kind of ache and stuff like that. It's a familiar feeling. I think we've spent a lot of time doing this, but every now and then it still kind of, you get surprised by, oh yeah, I forgot. I've been training hard the last couple of days. That's why everything hurts and I'm kind of maybe irritable.
Yes, yes. Man, I just keep thinking like, I'm tired today.
And I think that
Over and over again.
I
So
think
sorry. Okay,
I think
we're
that's
done. Let's stop complaining.
I think that's one of those things that you can kind of forget about too, where like you go in some days and you want to train and you train and you're like, man, why am I doing so bad? And you don't realize like it's because maybe you're worn out from. It could be a lot of different things. I've had days whenever I just have work stuff on my mind and I don't train good, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's just like, hey man, you got to take a break.
Yes, and that's like something like we kind of wanted to talk about today is just like the mistakes and maybe some of like the things we've done well in our jujitsu journeys or careers, whatever you want to call it. Um, because I think, you know, when you first start out and, people always like ask me like, when you first started training, like, how did you get good, like fast and what did you do? And for me, it was training 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day, like no rest days. And it was insanity because not only was I training jujitsu, I was doing kickboxing classes and doing like strength and conditioning like every day, literally every day, and working a full time job and going to school full time. I was in college full time. So it was just like, I don't even know
I know.
how I even did that or like how was it possible?
We were bad influences on each other in that way because
Yeah.
I remember telling somebody and like having to like almost be like, am I telling the truth? Because I feel like I've said this so many times, I can't imagine it now. But I mean, it was a regular routine for me to maybe work out 5 times a day.
Yeah.
I would wake up and run, and then I'd do MMA practice and jiu-jitsu practice or 2 jiu-jitsu practices, maybe a kickboxing class in there too. So that could be like the fourth. And then I'd be like, I didn't lift. I can't not lift weights. I'm not gonna be weak. So
Yeah.
that would be my fifth workout. You and I would go after our like class would get done at like 9 or 9:30, and then we go over to like the 24-hour fitness and work out sometimes.
Yeah, we would. That's like insane, and I don't know how. I don't even know how we did it, but we did it. And
when you're in your 20s, you can kind of get away with it. But
for sure, it made me. Sorry, I think these are going off. Yeah. For sure, it made me like better at jujitsu, and I got good quickly. But I feel like there's like sometimes like you don't realize, especially when you're younger, like how much like the miles that you're putting on your body, like the wear and tear, like long term. And I think that something that you have to learn is, the balance of it all. Like sometimes it's better to rest than it is just to push through a training session. Not only for your body, but it's also for like your like mental health, right? Like, because like for me, if you show up to training and you have a bad day because you're just like worn out, overtrained, tired, not feeling it, can't get out of first gear, I think that, and you train bad, it's like, I just suck at jujitsu. Like, take my black belt, take whatever. Like, I'm not good enough for this anymore.
I think once you get to black belt, you've trained enough to where you don't have like that thing in the back of your head that's telling you like you might not get good anymore. Or you might like get worse or something along those lines. And I think for me, looking back, like any dumb kid in their 20s, like I'm invincible. I'm like,
yes,
all you old people complaining about your aches and pains, whatever, like that's just because you're gonna not be in shape. I'm gonna never get out of shape.
Yes.
And I really haven't ever gotten out of shape, but
It's true.
like you said, the miles add up, and I think that that's one of the things you have to take into account, no matter what age you are when you start jiu-jitsu, is that it does add up. And while all the training, like you said, I mean, we both have benefited from like all the training. I do think that there's a lot of instances where we've probably added just insult to injury on top of just not needing to put in those extra miles.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to like getting ready, preparing for like tournaments, like every time I'm preparing for a competition, for me, I have this like weird thing in my head where it's like I need to train like, and I see that happen with a lot of jiu-jitsu people. It's like there's no taper, you know. We don't taper off like, especially when we're talking about like the big tournaments. That's, you know, like the worlds
You're
or
talking about people
whatever.
that compete.
But yeah, that's yes. But I'm saying in competition, I think like, do I need to taper for like just doing an open on the weekend? Probably not. Like, I'll take a day off. It's not the same. I don't put the same effort into preparing for those that I would, you know, the worlds or something like that. So, but, you know, every other sport and every other like athlete has this like tapering time. And there's so much, there's actually like there's a ton of research behind it. There's a ton of things like that would tell you like how to benefit. So you're peaking at the right time and you're, you know, but it's like, I think in jiu-jitsu, it's this like culture of just like push, 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 grind it out. I have to train harder than everyone else, which you see that in other things too, but especially with all like the hustle porn that's out there these days where it's just like, if you're not waking up at 4 a.m. and training and working out all day, it's like, then you're, you know, a loser and you're never going to amount to anything. You're not going to
get outworked by all these other guys. And I think that that's like one of the things that I've learned, and it was a mistake over time, is like you watch other things or you perceive that others are training harder or training more or something like that, or just that this extremely high volume or obsessive training is necessary to improve, or if you're competing, it's necessary to like keep up. And you know, like having been in so many different training rooms and been exposed to so many different types of jiu-jitsu like experts, like just people that, you know, I really respect. It comes in all shapes and sizes, but one thing is true, and that's quality over quantity, right?
Yes, yeah, I would definitely agree with that because I know there's been plenty of times like in like along the way where we've just been training just for the sake of training. Like I need to train, but it's like, okay, I show up, you know, I didn't have any good training partners. I just was tired, not feeling it, and then you just roll. And so it's like I just didn't get better. There was nothing that I did that improved myself, but I just wore myself down and put like unnecessary wear and tear on my body. And I think that I'm lucky enough now where we're at a place where I always have quality training partners and people that can push me and things like that. But I haven't always had that where I can walk in a room and have like tons of just good options of training to where I'm going to get pushed and like going to have opportunities to grow.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the, you know, a similar mistake that kind of goes alongside that is training through injuries when you don't really need to. And, you know, like I think we've talked before maybe on the podcast just about like there's a time to train around injuries, you know, like some, you know, like I remember when I was dislocating my finger a whole bunch, it wasn't something that was going to get fixed overnight. Like, and it made my game better because I realized I was relying on sleeve grips too much. But realistically, you know, there's been a lot of injuries. I mean,
realistically, you needed surgery on your finger and probably still do.
But
realistically,
I mean,
now you have 2 fingers you need surgery on.
I mean, they're probably never going to get it.
It's true.
I mean, the doctors are basically like, come back and let us know when you're done doing jiu-jitsu. I'm like, cool.
Because they just want to put like a metal like rod in your finger. I don't know. Well, can you even bend it?
To actually fix it, they like need to do fancy stuff to where it's like not gonna hold up. So it's like, I don't know. I guess you can do it to my corpse when it's dead. But realistically, like, there's a lot of injuries where you're gonna train through it for what purpose? You know, like all you're gonna do is basically add work to your body that you don't need to. And you can get better sometimes. I mean, honestly, like we talk about it a lot. Like when you're hurt, what do you want to do? Like you sometimes want to go jiu-jitsu more. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can learn a lot just like sitting around, like watching others train. Like
Yeah.
I think sometimes
Sometimes you can just show up be on the mats and like drill some things, but stay out of the sparring rounds or things like that. But I think we all go through that. In for me, I'll give you really good advice about what to do with an injury, but I'm not going to listen to my own advice, and that's like 100% true. And and it's not just resting when you have injuries. Well, hey, Cash, um, it's like it's knowing when like how to rehab them and doing the right things to like come back from them. So because that's not always like fun,
mm-hmm.
rehabbing injuries and doing that, it's not always fun. But I think there's a lot of cases where you should train, you can keep training, you can work around it, like start like getting emphasizing new things in your game, working around like injuries. And then there's another time where it's like you're probably just creating bad habits and not doing anything,
And I think
doing yourself any service. You're just prolonging the injury.
and another mistake that I think runs parallel with this, and I see a lot of others make this, and I think when you and I were talking about like doing this episode, talking about mistakes, whenever we've done a lot of episodes, we've been like, oh, these are the mistakes that people make or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, well, most of these we've made, so we could just kind of like be nice to people. But I think that this is one that we've made, but I see everybody making. That's at some point in jiu-jitsu, people are like, man, I got to get in shape or I got to get stronger or something like that.
So I think, that's one thing that people say a lot, and you hear them say, instead of realizing that their technique is what's suffering, they think that they just need to be stronger or in better shape or whatever. And I tell people this all the time, but there's nothing that's going to get you better at jiu-jitsu than training jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
Like, of course, do I do my strength and conditioning? Like, yes, because, those supplementary, like to supplement my training, I need those things. And then some of it I just enjoy doing. So that's, why I do it. But, it's so funny to me when the people are like failing at something or just feel like they're not progressing, and then they're like, I need to get stronger. Like, I just need to be stronger. And it's like, well, or you could just be more like rely more on your technique, because if you just get better technique, then you're probably going to have more success.
Well, think about it too. It's like, if somebody, you probably have a friend or you've probably heard somebody say this to you before where they're like, oh, the secret to me showing up and actually starting jiu-jitsu is I want to get in shape first or whatever.
Yes.
You're like, you're never going to get in enough shape to where you're not going to be exhausted, because it's like, it makes no difference.
That happens all the time. People say that and they're like, oh, I need to get in shape before I start training. What does that even mean? Like, why? For the first, I don't know. And for a while, you're not even going to be able to like spar enough that you would matter.
And think about this. It's like, if you go train like with a lower belt or a lower belt, like once you come train, it's like, you don't have to be in shape. Like you could like basically not break a sweat in some roles. And so it's like, it's all about efficiency. So that same rule that like you kind of like laugh when somebody says they're going to get in shape before they're going to come to jiu-jitsu. It's like the same thing applies when you're doing jiu-jitsu. So I personally, and I know I've seen a lot of others sidetracked by like getting obsessed with like all the ancillary workouts and diets and stuff like that associated with jiu-jitsu that should be supplementary, and somehow they end up being core. And the one that I haven't fallen into, but I've seen many, is CrossFit.
Yes. Well, that's funny because I did like my cousin was like super into CrossFit, so she wanted me to come to my gym. She's like, knows that I like work out all the time, and I was like a personal trainer and doing jiu-jitsu. So she's like, oh, you should come, do the CrossFit like class with me. So I did want like one class. I went with her, and I was so sore from that class because it's like you push yourself to the max that I like couldn't barely train the next day.
Yeah. I think it's super common that people experience that phenomenon where they're basically like, I need to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
They feel like they're getting tired. Like when you start getting better at jiu-jitsu and then all of a sudden you feel like, I need to take that next step. A lot of times you think like, well, it's something that I need to improve about myself physically.
Yeah, it's something outside of jiu-jitsu. And most of the time for me, it's been, And I've done that a lot where I just, because I don't know, I feel like I'm not getting enough or push enough in practice, that I feel like I need to work out more or do more, because I'm not, instead of like focusing on my weaknesses in on the mat, like I try and just supplement with things off the mat, and it's probably done me a lot more harm than good in a lot of ways, because then I'm relying on my physical attributes versus my technique.
And speaking of physical attributes, I think one of the mistakes that is easy to make is seeing somebody else do a move or somebody else be able to do something and be able to say like I should be able to do that too. Like
Yeah.
whether it's a certain game or technique or even just like the rate at which somebody is able to train or
Yeah.
like they can get away with stuff that you can't get away with. It's hard to say, but it's one of those things where it's like the one of the worst mistakes that you can make, and probably everybody will be guilty of it at some point, is comparing yourself to somebody else in jiu-jitsu.
Yes, yes. Whether, I mean, it goes in line with all the aspects of things that we've talked about today. It's like whether, what their training regimen is, what they like to do to prepare for a tournament, what they like to do to cut weight, what they like to do for workouts, all those things. It's like to compare yourself to somebody else. Like we all have our own, like, I mean, nobody's the same. So it's like we all have our like our own things that maybe it's like a mental thing where I like to do these things because it like mentally makes me feel prepared or better. But there's so many times it's like you learn techniques from certain people and I'm like, man, this isn't working for me. Like, am I
Mm-hmm.
just doing it wrong or whatever? And it's just like, well, their attributes, like their body type, their like whatever makes it easy for them to do those things, or
Yeah.
makes it like just more accessible of a movement. And so I think that you definitely can't say like, I'm gonna compare, like I wouldn't try and do the same moves like as like somebody that's like a lot bigger and taller than me, that like there's going to be certain things that obviously we would all do that's like fundamental jujitsu, but
Yeah.
like maybe their specialties, like yeah, I'm not going to have like the same abilities
It would be like, like I like the berimbolo. I'm not a big person. I'm relatively small,
mm-hmm.
and I look at somebody like Mikey Musumeci and I'm like, I want to do the berimbolo like him. But
Yeah.
then when you watch him, you realize like I'm not him. I can't do
Yeah.
the things that he can do. I can do the techniques, but I cannot do the techniques like he can. He can put his butt on the mat while his heels are also on the mat.
Yes.
And I think that that's one of those things where you have to be able to look at that. And you and I being able to go through jiu-jitsu so long together,
mm-hmm.
where like I try to show you something I'm doing and you're like, I can't do that. And
Yeah.
then me being like, oh yeah, I get
Yeah,
that.
I mean, there's like a couple things that you've tried to show me that like, you're really good at, and I would be so frustrated, and I would like get mad because I'm like, I'm not, like I can't do this, and then you're like no, like you're trying to show me how to do it like the way you're doing it. I'm like, yeah, like that's just not gonna work for me. Like your freaking horse legs are not the same as mine, so it just, there's just different things. And so it doesn't mean that jujitsu is a bad move. It just thinks, you have to think like, oh, it's just like not for me.
And I think
Sometimes.
one of the mistakes that I think you can make in jiu-jitsu, and I think this is more of like a longevity, more of just like a principle thing. So I mean, you don't have to think of things this way, but I think about the practicality of things a lot of times, where I'm like, at the end of the day, you can't let that happen, or you have to be able to protect yourself against that, because jiu-jitsu has to be effective.
Yeah.
And I think you and I talk about it a lot, where somebody might say like, oh well, I don't have to worry about that because like someone won't do that, or just like a lot of different types of scenarios and things like that. And then you realize like, listen, at the end of the day, like you have to be able to handle just about anything. You want your jiu-jitsu to be good, and I think
Mm-hmm.
if somebody gives you a certain type of problem or something like in particular is an issue for you, don't just say like, well, it's that person, or it's that one move, or whatever. Like figure that out. I think that that's like a real danger to your jiu-jitsu and just
Yes.
jiu-jitsu in general.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Like you definitely have to workshop some things. Like don't just throw things away right away. if you're not like it's not working for you at the first time you try it, well, probably didn't work for the person who showed it to you the first time they tried it either.
And that's a trap for me, and you know this about me,
Yes.
but it's like somebody might show a move, and for me, I'm like, it's not part of my game.
Yep. Yeah, you're very, very quick to dismiss those things. But it's funny because you're also like, oh man, like this is gonna work really well for me, and then it's just like, yeah, and then you find out it's like this isn't working for me. Like this isn't gonna be really easy. As easy to add into my game as I may have thought.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have had a chance to learn from a lot of really good instructors
Mm-hmm.
recently, and we've been to some seminars where we're like, dude, this technique is gonna change everything. This is amazing. And then like a month later, we'll both be like, "Are you using that at all?" And be like,
Yeah.
"No." And it's like that's crazy. Yet, you know, I find.
I mean, on the other hand, though, it's like there's been times where it's like we're like, yeah, I'm not really using it, and then for whatever reason, you get to a point where it's like, oh, now like this makes sense in my game, or this makes
Yeah.
sense, and like then you come back to things like there's always we were kind of talking about this yesterday about how that you always kind of circle back to techniques. It's like, man, I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like I was really, really good at this. Like, why did I stop doing it? And maybe it's because of an injury or like you start working on a different part of your game, but then you can come back to it. And
or all your training partners know you do that, and they all go out of their way to shut it down, and then they all forget.
That's one thing that you have to be careful of too. Is just like I can't play this anymore because at the academy, you know, nobody lets me do it. And it's like, yeah, because they know what your game is. So everybody's A, probably going to get good at defending it, and B, going to do everything they can to not let you get into that kind of stuff. So I will get frustrated by that a lot.
Especially if you have like a limited number of like good training partners, like that are even with you or something like that.
And I would be frustrated. I'm like, my stuff is not working. Like I can't even get into it. And I'm like, people are just doing dumb things so that and it's like, okay, instead of being mad that like that particular like thing isn't working, it's like, okay, well, if they're not giving me that answer, they're giving me something else because they're not reacting the proper way to that, to defend that. So it's like, there's a next step that I can take advantage of. And so it's like, then you start doing that. Well, now they have to actually try and defend your game, and then you're in it.
And I think that's a mistake that people can make of not training with somebody because maybe they're hard or they're difficult. We've probably all had different times when you're like, I don't feel like rolling with that person today.
Yeah.
Moose, whenever I used to train with him every day, one of my good friends, trained together all the time. It was not fun training with him. He's bigger, stronger. Sometimes it hurts to roll with him. And, like some days you're not feeling it, but you know it's the right thing to do, and it's going to make it better.
The days that you came home from training with Moose, and, like, there would be days it's like you had to train with him, like, multiple rounds, and I just was like, I just wanted to put you in an ice bath and, like, let you be because he was just in a bad way.
Where we were at the time in terms of just being able to challenge and push each other, we were, in some cases, the only two. And so, like, you ended up with this like obligation you felt like to train and help each other. And I don't know how many times I heard him, but
probably none times.
None. Hurt his feelings maybe. I think that's one of the things that you can make the mistake of doing is just hindering your own growth by not expanding out. Like if you only train at one place, like whenever you go on vacation, bring a gi with you. Whenever you have a chance to travel, train with as many people as possible. Like get exposure because, like you were saying, you can kind of fish out the waters on your techniques at your academy. And then whenever you go train with somebody new, that technique that you were really good at, that everybody knows you do, like you'll be training at somebody new, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh my god, I can't believe they're falling for it. Like it works so great. And it'll make sure that you don't like completely lop off stuff you're good at from your game.
I think that that's something that when we started training jiu-jitsu, that we were always encouraged to cross train when we could. And like traveling, we would always like bring our gis and try and like seek out different people to train with, or even our professor would have there's a couple gyms in town that we had good relationships with, and he would have days where it's like, oh, we're gonna have special training and bring people in or whatever. I know we went to train with our friends like Kyle, like when we were in St. Louis, and having those cross training abilities is like it's nice because you get to see new things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only do you get to use the stuff that you're good at, but now you get to see other people like new games or different things that people might not be showing you at your academy every day.
Yeah, and that's something that can happen a lot of times at academies. Like everybody kind of ends up learning a lot of the same things, so you kind of get this similar evolution. And so every now and then, I know we've been to tournaments before, we've been coaching students, and you realize like everybody's having the same problem. And you're like, revelation, because maybe at our academy we don't nobody goes to like DPAF or something like that. Mm-hmm. So everybody's getting swept from DPAF, and it's like, we have to address that. Oh God, we have to teach it so that people will play it. And I think that's the other mistake too, which is, you can get really hyper zoned in sometimes in jiu-jitsu on basically like this is going to work for me, or that's not going to work for me, or this is what I need to learn. But at the end of the day, like the stuff in jiu-jitsu that is going to make the biggest differences in your game are the really small, like really boring details. I mean, the things that I get better at now are the same things that made me a lot better when I was a blue belt, and that is like the little stuff. Really, really little stuff. Like if you're getting your guard pass, like don't let somebody get underneath your head. Like that's not any different now than it was then. Yeah. And you get better at it over time, and
And I think it's just like having like solid foundation of fundamentals and not ever giving up on learning like fundamentals. I think that's something that in the last like couple of years, like I'm like, oh man, like I didn't know that detail. Like I love watching like my professor teach a fundamental class, because I will like observe, and you even kind of can see the things that aren't said in the techniques, like that I'm like, oh my God, like I wasn't doing that. Or like they say something a certain way and you're like, that's so tiny, but it makes a huge difference on like a basic choke.
Yeah. There was something probably a month ago that somebody mentioned about a triangle choke. It was really, really basic, and I'm good at triangles. Mm-hmm. Been good forever. And it's one of those things where it's like
nice brag.
Humble brag.
Not even humble. That's not a humble brag. Like, I'm really good at triangles.
I'm really good at triangles. I dare you to try to not get triangled by me. See, now somebody get like
I'm gonna smack you on your head.
Go back. Next episode, I'm just in a neck brace.
I'm just gonna slam out of every triangle.
This is gonna start to be like, who's good at triangles? Slam. No, but like I think just like I remember hearing in detail, and I was like, oh yeah, and I think that's the thing you want to make sure that you just you're never too good to keep learning those things. I think it's a mistake you can easily make, or like kind of zone stuff out and say like, oh, I know this technique or whatever, and just learn to appreciate that. And I think, that's kind of I think that's fundamental to just the conversation today. Is so many of the mistakes that you have kind of come back to just not being like having a white belt mentality about a lot of different things. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like just being focused on learning jiu-jitsu and just starting there. Like,
and I think that's something too that we, like is hard for people to understand, is just like to always be asking questions. Like I see it happen a lot where you get discouraged, and I've done this in my own like journey, but it's always, I have you to like sound off on about things that I'm mad about, but you're always like either like I'm just venting to you, or like I'm not looking for you to fix anything in those. When I'm like complaining about stuff, it's just like I'll feel frustrated, like this isn't working and whatever, or like just frustrated in a whatever situation. There's been a lot of different things that have happened, and I'll get mad about something, and then I let that like, and maybe it's not even, it's like with people like around me, but like not even like jiu-jitsu related, but I let that like affect my training, my attitude about learning, and then I start getting frustrated and let that build, instead of like say like talking to my professor about like this is, I'm getting frustrated with this position or this thing or whatever, or talk about like your training, like what you want, and being very upfront about what you're trying to get out of your jiu-jitsu. I think it's important to have those conversations so that you don't get frustrated by something, or think like, there's been plenty of times that we've seen people just like take something that happens on the mat the wrong way and then never talk about it, and then they just leave or quit jiu-jitsu or quit, whatever, instead of having the conversation when it's like, oh, maybe like that was just a misunderstanding, or there's things that, as a professor, and I know that most of the people that I've been around that are professors, like if we're doing something that like is not like beneficial for you, or like that you're like not like, I don't know, if there's something that I would be doing wrong, I want people to bring it to me. Or if like if I'm done something gonna like not like make somebody feel included or whatever. I don't know. That's like,
you want to communicate with your professor.
Just communication.
And I think that comes back to basically like you want to do a good job of communicating your goals, because if you want to compete but you don't tell anybody, and you're like, man, I want to compete, but no one's ever helping me or whatever. Did you tell anybody?
Yeah. Or you sign up for a tournament and then you're like, they can't come coach me and nobody's going to come coach me. It's like, well, you have to tell us, and then you have to also like, there might be other things going on like that day, but we can find somebody to make sure you have a coach. But if you just don't tell anybody about it until the day before, it's like, well, you can't expect anything.
But I think that another thing too that'll happen, especially with students, is don't take things personally if a coach is trying to push you or trying to get you better. But belt promotions is a really big one.
Yes.
And I think that that's a mistake that people can make, where they're like, why am I not, you think it's your instructor not recognizing something about you or whatever. And it's like, maybe they're holding you to a certain standard or whatever. But it's okay to ask those questions. And you don't have to be like, why am I not a blue belt? You can be like, what do I need to work on to be able to be
like, what do I need to do to get me to that next level? Like, those are good questions to ask. And I think that having that kind of communication, because I think there's been a lot of situations where either my pride or just whatever has kept me from like communicating with my professors or whomever, or just, and it's been something that's like definitely been detrimental to me, like growing.
And I think one of the things, like the other side of that coin, and this is getting outside of our mistakes, I guess maybe a little bit, but is if you are in a situation where you're like, I just don't feel like I click at this place. I love jiu-jitsu, but my instructor or the environment or something like that is just like, it's not what I'm feeling, and it's making me less excited about jiu-jitsu, and I'll probably quit. Like, it's okay. Like, you can leave. You're not trapped. Like, I think one of the mistakes in general people make in jiu-jitsu is just feeling like, I started with this affiliation coach
at this school, and now I have to be there forever. Like,
I have to be there forever, and that's not the case.
And I think, so at the end of the day, like, so I think number one, you have to talk to those people about, like, talk to your professors and stuff, like, first, like, see if there's changes that can be made. If no changes are made, like, you have to remember, like, you're a customer, like, you're paying for a service. So if you're not happy with the service that's being provided to you, you have the freedom to leave and go and find a place that you can be happy and grow. And I think that's something that people get really, I don't know, there's just like a lot of old school mentality about that type of thing.
And I think even you can look at it beyond just business transactional and just say, like, it comes back to being happy. Jiu-jitsu is something that a lot of us will do our entire lives, and it's something that we all used to be happier. I mean, during the pandemic and everything else going on, it's been taken from a lot of people, and that's what people use for community, for social connectedness, and so it plays a really big role in people's happiness. You can see it as people are starting to come back and train, and so I think it's really important for you to be honest with yourself about like what is making you happy. Like, are you happy? Do you feel obligated to train a whole bunch? I think that's a mistake that we've made. Or do you feel obligated to compete and you don't really maybe enjoy it?
And if you're somebody that's just casual and like you have people like telling you like you need to be there every day, and if you're not training like whatever, it's like, man, like to each their own. Like if you're okay with just training twice a week and you're going to progress a little bit slower than other people, but don't feel obligated to do something that like is not within, that's going to put stress on your family or you or whatever else.
Or compete,
or just, you don't have to compete.
I think there's been times even, you put your name down to compete and,
it's driving me nuts.
I know.
I'm getting eaten up by my dog right now. Come here.
We're almost done.
Yeah. Here, look. This is the little monster that's wants to be on the camera.
Yeah, and so
He's happy now.
there's a lot of things in life that can grab your attention, and I think that one of the things is even if you're committed to doing a tournament or something, it's okay to be like, you know what, I'm not going to do this one because too many other things are going on in life, and if it's not going to be fun, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And the thing is like that's a mistake I've made. So if you're just somebody that's like looking for an excuse to like get out of it, like, hey, you need to push yourself. I think that's probably more common.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, it's about you being happy. And I think a lot of the mistakes that people make in jiu-jitsu, it's because they get focused on non-jiu-jitsu things.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for me too, just like learning to not put so much pressure on myself when I am competing to where it's not fun anymore, because the whole purpose of competing is like, I always tell people, if it's not fun, like, why are we doing it, you know? And I love competing, but there's a lot of times where I stress myself out so much about preparing for a tournament or whatever that I just like, it's not fun anymore. And I'm like, I don't even want to do it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the moral of the story for this episode is if it's not fun, like, there's a good chance it's a mistake.
Yeah,
and
maybe getting a puppy was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, seems like
I kid. I love him.
No, but we want to thank everybody for watching the podcast and listening to the podcast. If you listen to this on a place where you can leave a review, that'd be awesome, because those things continue to help us grow the podcast. It's continuing to grow, and as that happens, we'll continue to try to do more cool things. We'd love interaction from all of you. There is a text line on not-fighting.com. If you want to text or leave a voicemail, we'll respond, bring it up on the show, whatever. So yeah, do your worst.
Oh, sorry, I'm real yawny today.
Thanks for watching another episode of
Not Fighting.
I'm glad you remembered this.